The LinkedIn Podcast Network is sponsored by Oracle. AI may be the most important new computer technology ever. Do more and spend less like some of the world's most successful companies. Take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/LinkedIn Podcast Network.
Hey, if you're going to be in New York next week, join me for a live conversation with Yuval Noah Harari, historian and best-selling author of books like Sapiens and Homo Deus. He'll be talking with us and answering your questions about his latest book, Nexus, A Brief History of Information Networks from the Stone Age to AI. If you'll be in New York City, come join us live on Wednesday, September 11th at BetaWorks Studios in the Meatpacking District. You can get a signed copy of the book and join us for a cocktail and the live conversation. Otherwise, tune in to the live stream if you're not going to be in New York. For more details and to get tickets, go to nextbigideaclub.com/events. Now, on with the show.
LinkedIn presents.
George Carlin once said, "Scratch a cynic and you'll find a disappointed idealist." Many of us adopt cynicism because we've been hurt in the past and don't want to be hurt again. But by putting up our defenses, we turn out to miss out on all sorts of social opportunities for friendship, collaboration, and love. Cynicism is only safe in the way that house arrest is safe.
What's up, people? Today is Friday. My name is Michael Kovnat, and this is the Next Big Idea Daily, the show that makes smart people smarter by offering quick summaries of the most interesting new books written and read to you by the authors themselves. And the question for today is, are you cynical? If your innate tendency is to be wary of people, you're not alone. A recent survey showed that only about a third of Americans think their fellow human beings are generally trustworthy. But the truth is, you might want to have a little more faith, according to Jamil Zaki, author of the new book, Hope for Cynics, The Surprising Science of Human Goodness. Jamil is a professor of psychology at Stanford University and the director of the Stanford Social Neuroscience Lab. Our curator, Adam Grant, says his book is a ray of light for dark days. Here's Jamil to share a few of his big ideas.
Cynicism is a psychological poison. We can define cynicism as a theory about people, the idea that humanity in general is selfish, greedy, and dishonest. You can test yours right now by seeing whether you agree with these statements. 1. No one cares much what happens to you. 2. Most people dislike helping others. 3. Most people are honest, chiefly through fear of getting caught. If you agree with bleak statements like this, you might be on the cynical side, and if you are not alone. In 1972, about half of Americans believed that most people can be trusted. By 2018, that had fallen to a third of Americans. That's about as big of a drop as the stock market took in the financial collapse of 2008. Cynicism is on the rise, and that's totally understandable. In a world full of corruption and injustice, and one in which the media point us to negative more than positive actions. But that doesn't mean that cynicism helps us. In fact, it hurts us in basically every way psychologists can measure. Cynics versus non-cynics tend to suffer from more depression, loneliness, and anxiety. Their relationships tend to fracture, as does their health. Cynics, for instance, are more likely to develop diabetes and heart disease and even die younger than non-cynics. Thomas Hobbes once said that people need society because left to their own devices, our lives would be nasty, brutish, and short. That is a perfect encapsulation of cynical thinking, but ironically often describes cynics themselves better than anyone else. Cynicism is overrated. If cynical thinking hurts us so much, why do more of us adopt it each year? One reason is that our culture glamorizes cynicism in at least 3 ways that are clearly inaccurate. First, we act like it's wise. In surveys, about 70% of people say that cynics are smarter than non-cynics. And about 85% say that cynics would be socially smarter than non-cynics. For instance, better at spotting liars. In other words, most of us put faith in people who don't put faith in people. Most of us are wrong. In fact, cynics do less well on cognitive tests than non-cynics and are worse at spotting liars. If you think everyone's on the take, you stop paying attention to what people are really like. Second, we think cynicism is safe, even when it's actually dangerous. George Carlin once said, "Scratch a cynic and you'll find a disappointed idealist." Many of us adopt cynicism because we've been hurt in the past and don't want to be hurt again. But by putting up our defenses, we turn out to miss out on all sorts of social opportunities for friendship, collaboration, and love. Cynicism is only safe in the way that house arrest is safe. Third, we think that cynicism is moral, a way of calling out injustice and speaking truth to power. But in fact, it's more like a tool of the status quo. Cynics see all of the problems in society, but don't imagine any solutions. Because of this, they're less likely to take part in civic engagement, voting less often, protesting less often, and in general, giving up when we might want to fight for a better future. Cynicism doesn't just break us as individuals, but also harms our communities. Skepticism is a better approach. Cynics think like lawyers in the prosecution against humanity. They hyper-focus on any evidence about the harm people do and ignore or explain away all the good that we do. In this way, cynics have more in common with the naive rubes that they often make fun of. A naive truster might focus a lot on the kindness of other people and ignore the harm that they do. Both of these groups of people ignore half of the evidence, even if they're opposite halves. Skepticism is different. Although often confused with cynicism, skepticism is actually a hunger for more evidence and information before making a judgment, and an unwillingness to sit with our assumptions. If cynics think like lawyers, skeptics think like scientists. This allows them to learn in quicker, more agile ways about the world and people around them. It's also more positive. Cynicism has brought us to a place in our culture where study after study demonstrates that people underestimate how kind, open-minded, warm, and compassionate most of us are. The average person underestimates the average person. That means that when we reject cynicism and use skepticism to pay closer attention, pleasant surprises about humanity are everywhere. Hope is not naive. While cynicism has been glamorized in our culture, hope has been typecast as naive or privileged or even toxic, a way of ignoring our problems and the world's. That's not what it actually is. We should remember that hope is different from optimism. Optimism is the assumption that things will go well. You can think of it maybe as a rose-colored pair of glasses, and something that could lead us to complacency. If things are going to turn out great, then why should I do anything about it? Hope is different. It's the idea that things could turn out better and that we have a say in shaping how the future unfolds. Because of this, hope is practical and fierce, where optimism is easy and passive. Hope also has enormous benefits to our health, both individual and social. Hopeful people tend to be happier, more resilient, and more efficacious. They pursue their goals more fiercely and achieve them more often. And hope isn't just for the privileged, quite the opposite. It's especially useful for hard times, and people experiencing adversity tap into it often to fight for their rights and for social movements. Because of this, we should rethink hope not as something that causes us to put on a pair of rose-colored glasses, but as a way of taking off the mud-colored glasses that many of us are often wearing already. Hope is a skill, and we need it more than ever. There are lots of ways that we can try to replace cynicism with what I call hopeful skepticism. That is, combining an openness to evidence with an understanding that for most of us, our default is probably too negative, and people are probably better than we think they are. The first is to think differently. I call this fact-checking our cynicism. Next time you find yourself thinking that people are generally terrible or making judgments about another individual, ask yourself, what evidence am I basing this on? And is there better data that I could collect to figure out whether I'm right? The second is to act differently. One version of this is taking small, calculated leaps of faith on other people, giving them chances to show us who they are. And a third is to share differently. We tend to talk a lot about the worst things that people do, and that type of gossip is understandable. But we might try positive gossip, sharing instead the kind and wonderful things that we see people doing, which, of course, they do all the time. None of this is to say that hope is the answer or that positive thinking will fix the enormous problems that we face as a culture. But hope, the idea that things could turn out well, and the empowerment to try to shape the future in positive ways is especially important during difficult times like these. Hope fuels social movements and drives fierce efforts to upend and improve the status quo. We need it more than ever. Hope is not naive. It's a magnet pulling us towards a better future, one which we now desperately need.
Thank you, Jamil. All right, that's our show for the day and for the week. If you're not already subscribed to the show, be sure to hit the follow button in your podcast player. And remember, we've got a lot of ways to keep you up to date on big ideas. We've got an app, a hardback book club, audio and video e-courses, and lots more. Check it all out at nextbigideaclub.com. And if you like what you see there, use the code DAILY for a special discount. That's nextbigideaclub.com and use the code DAILY. This week's episodes were written by me, Michael Kovnat, and edited by Caleb Bissinger. The Next Big Idea Daily is proud to be part of the LinkedIn Podcast Network. We'll see you next week.